What is going on, IF Warriors? So today we're going to talk about why intermittent fasting just doesn't work because TikTok says so. This is all random, just picking a random guy. I have no ill will to this gentleman, Exercise Medicine. He's just looking at a study and stating his interpretation of the study to everyone else. And to be fair, even scientists and researchers do this as well. They look at a study, they look at what the overall consensus is of that study. Oh, no, difference with intermittent fasting. Daily caloric restriction and caloric restriction with intermittent fasting, there's no difference at all. So let's go ahead and look at what he says. Let's take a look at it real quick.
Yet again, intermittent fasting does not work better than calorie deficit when it comes to weight loss. The study just came out in the GOAT journal stating that whether you eat your calories within an 8.
By the way, the New England Journal of Medicine is one of the GOAT journals, yes. But there's also the Lancet. There's also the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. There's so many of these. There's so many. So don't think that just because the New England is a popular one, that it is the only one. And none of that even matters, really. They're just, it does to an extent in terms of the peered reviews that need to happen. Usually it takes about 3 peered reviews from different people within the same field to allow it to be published on here. So they have to review it themselves. They have to look at it, look at the raw data, look at the normal data, and decide that, okay, this can be published. There is significant value for this to be published. There is a difference in terms of other studies for this to have a place in science, and then that gets published. And these journals are just the more prestigious journals that do more intense reviews. So that's the reason why they're important, but they're not important in terms of the study themselves. Just because a study goes on there doesn't mean that it makes that study more powerful than a study that was peer reviewed in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Just putting that out there. Let's let him finish. Hold on.
8-hour time frame period, intermittent fasting, or throughout the day, that does not matter when it comes to weight loss or any other cardiometabolic health indicators such as fasting insulin, blood pressure, etc. Here's a summary slide if you want to read it yourself. I'm not gonna lie, a full year of fasting and it had no difference than calorie restriction alone, that does not look good.
Okay, all right, so that's the study that he referenced, right? I'm going to go off of a few things, right? Let's go off of a few things. Number one, there's always this weird recency bias when it comes to studies, which is like, what's the latest thing, the latest study say about a specific topic, right? What's the latest study say about intermittent fasting? Well, the latest studies say that there's no difference between calorie restriction and intermittent fasting. So then that means that this study has now overridden every other intermittent fasting. The 60 to 70,000 intermittent fasting studies mean nothing because of this new intermittent fasting study. Number one, that's not the case. That's not how it happens. On the contrary, it's the magnitude of studies. It's the methodology, the designs of the study. How strong is the methodology? Is it a controlled study? Is it a randomized controlled trial? Is it just a study where it just talks about intermittent fasting? Because those are not as powerful as studies that have a control, which is like daily caloric restriction, as this one does. This one does. I'm not taking that away from this study. It does have that. But then you have to also look at the little differences between how people talk and how things are presented, and then how people talk to you. For example, he said, there's no difference. I don't see any, there isn't any difference. There isn't a substantial difference. Now, because this study says that there's no difference, what people end up doing is people that are against intermittent fasting for whatever reason, that doesn't make any sense to me, because you should be able to do whatever regimen works for you. I'm not a person that says you have to do intermittent fasting or that intermittent fasting is even better than anything else. All I say is that pick the regimen that works for you. And if intermittent fasting is not that, don't do it. But people go on this all or nothing kind of crusade. And they say, well, since it says there is no difference, what I'm reading is that intermittent fasting doesn't work, no, intermittent fasting is a choice. That's what that means, that you could choose to do daily caloric restriction or you could choose to do intermittent fasting. It is a choice. But when people also say, well, intermittent fasting isn't magic. You're not going to lose more body fat with intermittent fasting than you are with daily caloric restriction. They're removing themselves from the science of intermittent fasting because it isn't magic. It is science. What happens when you are fasting is that your triglycerides, your fatty acids, they are used and replace. They replace essentially your glucose, because you deplete the glucose in your body. Therefore, your brain requires sugar. So the energy comes from the body fat. It comes from the fat cells. They release the fatty acids into the bloodstream to provide, and then it goes into the liver, turns into beta hydroxy through the beta hydroxybutyrate process, and then turns into ketones. And then now that's the substitute for sugar. When you're just eating all the time and glucose is not depleted, that process doesn't take place. Therefore, there is a higher calorie partitioning element that comes from body fat, simply from the science of what happens when you have no more glucose in your system because it was depleted due to the fact that you haven't been eating, right? This is not magic. Like people say it's not magic. It's not that we're saying that is magic. It is based on science, that it's coming from the scientific element of fasting and what happens to your body scientifically when you fast. That's like saying you can't be hydrated by drinking water. Water isn't magic. It's not going to hydrate you. No, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because when you drink it, it goes into your system and now your body carries water. Your body has water. It can create glycogen with the water that you've consumed, and you are now hydrated. So it isn't magic that water hydrates you. It is science that water hydrates you. It isn't magic that intermittent fasting causes glucose to be depleted. Therefore, ketones has to be replaced via the fatty acids. There's no other source where it comes from, the fatty acids, until after a certain point, yes, glucose neogenesis starts to take place. But before that point, it comes from fatty acids. And you tend to eat before that glucose neogenesis happens anyways. So then that's not magic. That is science. Now, if we look at the study that he is talking about, which is right here, it came out in April 21st of 2021. And I always want to give kudos to the researchers. Let me see if I can go up here. Ying, Louis, and colleagues. And I think I may have talked about this study because I talk about all studies that show intermittent fasting in a positive light, studies that show intermittent fasting in a negative light. I don't hold anything back from you guys. I don't cherry pick studies. I talk about all the studies. Even this study, it leans towards the crusade of people saying that intermittent fasting is not useful, which this does not say that. It says that it is a choice. It doesn't say that it doesn't work. It says that it does work, but you could choose to do this or daily caloric restriction. But when I talk about the fat loss, it having an edge in fat loss, that is always seen in the study. They did not say that intermittent fasting has no difference. I love when the people hear there isn't a difference, there isn't a significant difference, there isn't a substantial difference, therefore that means no difference. And just like the gentleman just said, he's just going to say to you, there's no difference. You're going to hear he's going to tell you no difference. You're going to hear no difference. You're going to think it's the exact same. It isn't the case. It isn't the case that it's the exact same. If we go here, even if we look at the chart, right? You look at the chart, the blue line is intermittent fasting. The gray line is daily caloric restriction. So you see DCR, TRE, time restricted eating, right? Because they're changing it to time restricted eating, which tends to be just eating earlier. And it's within the 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating time window, which I love. This is a powerful tool, right? That it's shown to be very successful if you do 16-8, right? But look at this. If we look at relative body weight change, there's more weight loss in the intermittent fasting group. Granted, it's not substantial, but there's more, right? And they're doing the same type of calorie restriction. And then if you look at daily caloric restriction and TRE in absolute weight change, there's still more weight lost in the intermittent fasting group. And now, if we look at what they say here, let's look at body composition, right? Let's look at let's look at weight loss, right? 12-month period, there was a minus 8.0 kilogram difference in weight loss for the time restricted eating group. And for the daily caloric restriction group, it was minus 6.3 kilograms. And if we look at that, that is 17 pounds, if you change it into pounds, lost for the intermittent fasting group, and 13 pounds lost for the caloric restriction group. Now, this includes a lot of stuff. This includes, muscle and just the total body fat, water, and all that stuff is all included in there. But this body composition, this is not. This is different. This is including body fat, which is the primary thing that intermittent fasting has an edge over, because it does even things like white adipose browning, which turns your white adipose tissue, which is the fat tissue, into brown fat tissue, which brown fat tissue is more revved up, more easily burned, right? So it does all these different processes where it works on body fat specifically. And if we look at that, it says it was reduced by 5.9 kilograms from baseline. So it means from where they were to the reduction, 5.9 kilograms from the time restricted eating group, and by 4.5 kilograms from the daily calorie restriction group. That's a difference of 13 pounds and 10 pounds, right? So that's a 4-pound difference between the weight loss of 17 to 13 pounds. That's a 4-pound difference with the intermittent fasting group. And that is a 3-pound difference with the 13 to 10, right? So 13 pounds of overall weight loss, and then 10 pounds of that overall weight loss was body fat. 17 pounds of overall weight loss, and then 13 pounds of that overall weight loss was body fat. So there was more overall weight loss that was lost in the intermittent fasting group just by a pound. But if we look at the amount of weight that was lost with the intermittent fasting group, 13 pounds versus 10 pounds, then that is a difference of 3 pounds. And if I show you, see, this is one thing that people don't understand. They think that 3 pounds of body fat is nothing. 3 pounds of body fat, oh, that's not a big deal, is it? 3 pounds of body fat. What is 3 pounds of body fat? I lose 3 pounds of body fat when I go to sleep and wake up. No, you don't. You're losing water weight. You're losing so many other things. But even if you were to lose the fat in your face, it's not going to be 3 pounds. Even if you were to lose some of the fat in your arms, it's not going to be 3 pounds. 3 pounds of body fat is a lot. And just to show you what 5 pounds of body fat looks like, this is 5 pounds of just pure body fat. So let this sink in. This is 5 pounds of pure body fat lost from your body. Still think that 3 pounds isn't that big of a difference? It is. Overall, scientifically speaking, no, it isn't. It isn't a substantial weight loss. Numerically, it's not. On your scale, it's not. Visually, it is. Visually, it is. And all this tells me is that intermittent fasting, even if it's a pound, even if it's 2 pounds, it still carries an edge of burning fat over just doing caloric restriction without applying an intermittent fasting system. Now, even if intermittent fasting is not doing anything extra for you in terms of body fat loss, people need to stop having this crusade of telling people to stop doing intermittent fasting if intermittent fasting works for them. It's like, oh, that works for you, but stop doing it because this study says it doesn't work. The study does not say it doesn't work. The study is never saying it doesn't work. The study is simply saying it works just as well, which means it is a choice. You can do it or not. And I've always told my viewers, even you guys, don't do intermittent fasting if it's something that just doesn't work for you. Just don't do it. But to pretend like there isn't a biological element or mechanism that takes place where body fat is targeted more through intermittent fasting simply from the process of ketone bodies is to be lying to the public. That is my 2 cents today. We're going to keep on looking at these TikToks, Instagram, whatever studies they post, and we're going to look deeper into the study, or not deeper, but just look at certain specific aspects of the study so that you can see why things are better or different, or even if intermittent fasting in that particular study failed or didn't do what wasn't better or was worse or whatever the case may be. All right, guys, until next time, this is Edward. See ya.